One of the other issues was the chip manufacturing. I am fascinated by that. So the United States was taking action in order to try to put pressure on China's chip industry, trying to basically cripple their technological capability. China said, okay, we'll build our own. And they turned around and they built their own chips. Now, the chips that are coming in from NVIDIA, China has looked at those with a heavy amount of skepticism, as they should, by the way, considering what may be, let's say, backdoors, or maybe it looks like China is looking for deep into the future of a potential military engagement and don't want any kind of, let's say, weaknesses in their systems in the way that, let's say, Iran might have had weaknesses in their systems because of the chips that they were getting from India.
It's a little more than that. You're right. You're 100% right, but there's a little bit more to it than that. And what happened 2 or 3 years ago, the US decided that it was going to stymie China's growth, and the best way to do that was to defy them and say, you're not getting any of the really high-end chips that you need. And once that decision was made, they then went to South Korea, they went to Taiwan, and they went to their American partners and said, you guys can't sell anymore. And then they went to Holland, where the machines are made to make these chips, and said, some of this is our proprietary property. You can't sell it to China. So China was then left. And you say that we can all argue and agree or disagree about how bad this was. But this was devastating for China. To suddenly be cut off from what they needed was devastating. So what then happened was China had to find backdoors to get these things. And they did. They found some suppliers they were buying from other places. But ultimately, they said, we need to make our own. And everybody said, this is not possible. It will take 10 years. Everybody outside of China said, this is going to take 10 years to overcome. China said, well, we'll do it in 3. And that's what they did. China speed is a very commonly used phrase here in China, particularly here in Guangdong, where I live. And Shenzhen speed, Guangdong speed, China speed. Basically, what they did was they threw a load of resources at it. They threw some really good people at it and said, you've got to come up with something fast. So now China has a new chip. It has a whole range of new chips, all the way down to the bog standard, bottom of the range chips that power up your washing machines and stuff and your fridges. So what they've done now is they've said, we no longer need NVIDIA. NVIDIA went to Trump, appealed to Trump, and got permission to sell the higher level chips that were not the highest level. And Trump agreed with that, but they had to pay a 15% export tariff. I mean, they didn't call it that, but that's what it is. It was 15% got paid into the Trump war chest if NVIDIA were going to sell these H20s, which were the chips that they were going to sell. When that happened, quite rightly, I think China looked at it and said, well, hang on, why has Trump changed his mind? And I've said this many times, you accuse others of what you are guilty of.
Yes.
This is exactly what is happening here. There was a report today, just today, in Australia's media about how Australia could be in danger with Chinese cars because China can either switch them all off, which will cause traffic chaos. It can explode them. They are listening and monitoring devices. Now, all of these things, China has never, ever hinted or indicated that it could or will or even has the ability to do this. So it's accused the other of what you may be guilty of yourself. So it looks to me like China just went to NVIDIA and said, we want to know all the information about these chips. And NVIDIA said, no, we're not going to give you that information. So then they said, well, we're not going to allow them to be imported. So for 3 years, America has said, you can't buy them. We're not going to sell them to you. Now America said, we will sell them to you. And China said, we've got something else. We're frightened of what you might be putting into them, so we're not going to buy them. So just yesterday or the day before, as a result of what's happening in Madrid, the trade talks going on in Madrid, where the TikTok thing was finalized. It certainly hasn't been finalized, but it's coming to its final stages now. But that's happening in Madrid, where they had a neutral place to have these meetings. And what as a result of that meeting, China came out and said, we're not buying NVIDIA anymore. So we're not going to buy any American chips. We're going to only buy chips from our own suppliers, SMIC, Huawei, companies like that. There's a new company which has come up with a completely different chip. And I'm not a scientist. I don't know anything about it, but it's a completely different process. And it's better, faster, and cheaper to produce by all accounts. So China has now become self-reliant, self-sufficient, and secure. And it doesn't have the risks of the American chips, nor does it have the risk of what America did before, weaponizing the chip. What it has done is exactly what America did to them 3 years ago. It's weaponized the product that America must have and can't live without. And that's the rare elements. So China has weaponized, for sure. There's no argument there. And people say, China are evil for doing this. Well, no, you did it first. It's simple as that. You did it first. There's no evil intent there. There's just a simple case of you're going to put this into weapons that point at us. We don't want that. They've weaponized it. So good luck to China, in my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, all of these things are rational acts. Then all of these things were effectively spurred on by U.S. behavior in trying to either weaponize chips, weaponize the AI thing, weaponize, weapons themselves that they were going to use rare earths and then turn around, make weapons to aim at China. Yeah, all of these things are rational acts. These things aren't
China has done nothing except ask for and look for global cooperation everywhere. Every single thing that China puts out asks for and looks for global cooperation. China doesn't want to change the rules of the World Trade Organization. It doesn't want to change the rules or the Charter of the United Nations. It simply says, why don't we all apply by these rules? We do. Right. Why can't you? And that's what China is asking America now. Why aren't you applying your own rules? As soon as we get to the position where we're stronger than you, you bring in new laws which don't conform with World Trade Organization. They don't conform with the United Nations Charter. I mean, the United Nations Charter has just been ripped up and shredded in the last few weeks, but the World Trade Organization rules have been shredded for the last 10 years or thereabouts.
Yeah, I've said there's no such thing as international law.
Not anymore, no.
I would tell you, I would give it in this kind of parable, I guess, what I call a parable. The Democratic Party for the longest time had said, hey, lefties, I know you don't agree with us, but we're all in this together. You're closer to us politically, and we are now the leader in this. We had New Deal Democrats at one point, and now you've had third way. When Sanders ran, Sanders easily had the thrust of the energy was behind him. They did any and everything in their power to put a knife in Sanders. And meaning this idea of us being in the same boat is nonsense. It was only we were ahead and we wanted to con you into believing that we were somehow on the same team. We were not on the same team. The moment that you got a candidate that was a better, stronger candidate, we did everything in our power to put a knife in him. The U.S. was the same way. We could make that argument of freedom, justice, rules that we should follow. The UN is a great thing and everything else. When we were in the lead, the moment that we couldn't compete on equal footing, it all changed almost overnight. Yeah,
I'll bet you there's not many American people have read the United Nations Human Rights Report on America. You as an American are not very good at human rights in your own country. It's quite shocking that America, this is why America got out of the Human Rights Commission. They stopped being a member of it. They withdrew out of it and they said, no, we're not going to be part of this. And because they and Israel were being criticized for human rights issues. And so America pulled out under Trump. They pulled out again in parts of things like this. They're pulling out of this. They're pulling out the Paris Accord. They're pulling out. Basically, they pull out. I mean, America will never get pregnant because they pull out too early of everything.
Sometimes that's a good thing, Jerry. Sometimes you got to pull out.
Yeah, who wants to be America's bastard child? Oh,
right.
Sorry.
Right.
Wash my mouth out with soap. I'm sorry.
No, you're fine. You're fine. It's like daddy decides to leave. You don't necessarily want that. Got to pull out. No, you're right. When it comes down to it, at the end of the day, we're not all that trustworthy in the sense of stick-to-itiveness. I mean, the UN report that just came out about the genocide thing is disturbing. And again, we don't acknowledge it. We don't accept it. The rest of the world.
Has it even been published in American media at all?
I haven't.
Do American media know about? Australian media don't. So, I mean, Australian media have talked about how Israel is being criticized by the United Nations, but the word genocide has not been used in Australian media. The ABC, the Australian Broadcasting Corporation, are not talking about genocide. They're talking about criticism of Israel. The United Nations has criticized Israel. Yes, it has, for genocide. They didn't mention that. At least not the reports I read.
I haven't seen the reports. I mean, I haven't seen, obviously I cover news all day, so I've seen it, and I've read through it, but I haven't seen it covered on any kind of media outlets. So no, you're absolutely right. These AI chips, I'm curious on something else. These also, now that this is a business that China has effectively generated and created with the industrial might, these are things that can be sold across the world, especially the global South countries that China is in alliance with.
And they'll be open sourced as well. So Americans can produce them. There won't be a problem with that. Once these things are up and running in the market, they'll be open sourced. So there'll be a factory in Uganda making them. There'll be a factory in Botswana that makes them. There'll be a factory in Guatemala, not Guatemala. Guatemala doesn't deal with China. It deals with Taipei. It's probably I think it's one of two countries in Latin America that does. That was a bad example, but yeah, somewhere in Colombia, Nicaragua, there will be a factory that makes these things for the global South at global South prices. Yeah, that's how China operates.
Wait, you said they're going to be open source. So how they're made?
They're not yet. They're not at the moment because they're still protected. But once these things are up to full speed, I'm fairly certain they will be open source. Pretty much everything China does, it open sources. If you take a look at DeepSeek, you can get in there. It's all open source stuff. All of these things that China does, it puts them on the market and says anyone else can share in this. They're not in it. Of course, they want to make money. The barriers to entry on this are extremely high. So you can't just set up a factory in Botswana and do it. You need to have billions of dollars to set up that factory. So China will go there to Botswana, set up the factory, help them, train them, work them into a working operation so that Botswana has its self-sufficiency. I'm just an example. It won't be Botswana, but so that the country they're made in has this as part of what they do, and they'll be available to people at prices that are open source prices. So it's not like, if you make a new mouse for your computer and you open source that, anyone can make that. It's not very difficult. If you're making a special DUV lithographic 5 nanometer chip, no, not everyone can make it. But if it's open source, anyone can. America will be able to make this. And they will be able to use them, but they'll be very worried that if they're using this open source that's Chinese, what's it capable of?
I'm curious on something else. Give me your take on this. I know China will make the argument, we're doing this because we want to advance humanity, meaning our objective is human advancement. That's what we want to do. So when we're going and working with other countries, they obviously want to work with us because A, we're not trying to tell them what they should do with their politics if we're given a loan or something. B, we're not trying to tell them how they should, we're not saying you should be more woke. You need to change your government. We're not telling you any of that stuff.
No.
Ultimately, they build roads, hospitals, highways, etc. It's China. I mean, this goes beyond human advancement, though, right? I mean, there's a geopolitical rationale for doing something like this.
It's mutual benefit. China's not doing it for free. There's definitely mutual benefit there. China, it'd be very naive to think that China is so nice that they just give away all of their profits. They haven't even developed China yet. They're working around the world and they haven't yet developed China. China is on the East Coast extremely well developed. But as you say, I've traveled, it's closer to 40,000 kilometers. You ride a bike through central China, and you see some absolutely poverty-ridden places. They still riding around on old tricycles, but what you don't see now are donkey carts. You don't see goats pulling carts, which is something I've seen in the past. You don't see people living in hovels with no electricity anymore. Nobody in China has got that now. I mean, it's moving out of abject poverty into gaining towards a moderately prosperous society, but there are still a lot of poor people, and China hasn't yet fully developed. But going back to the 1950s, the moment China controlled all of China's borders, which was about 1955, not 1949, as as most people believe. There's still parts of China were a little bit behind, and some parts were controlled long before 1949. But when 1949, the October the 1st, was the first national day, China, the People's Republic of China, was announced. They still didn't control all of China. They controlled most of it. So in 1955, they started to control all of China, and they were helping African countries, any African country that had a Marxist or socialist leaning and was trying to shake off the shackles of colonialism. China helped them, and helped them in a way that, some of it was financial, some of it was infrastructure, and they've been doing it since then. Since 1950s, China has been helping. So this is what they do. They lifted, and the story about 800 million people lifted out of poverty is not strictly true. 800 million people lived in abject poverty in China in 1949. Everyone was in poverty in 1949. It was 800 million people. Now there's 1.4 billion people. And of course, we've got more people. And the people who've been lifted out of poverty are basically all the people that existed in poverty in 1949, 1950. So this number is just a kind of a guide. Everyone in the country is now out of abject poverty, and the country's working hard not to allow them to slide back into it. So there's all kinds of things going on, but that's another story. There's a guy you need to talk to, a guy called Jason Smith, who works in China, and he does a podcast called The Bridge Podcast in China. Now, Jason, I can put you in touch with him, has just written a book about, the book is called A World Without Poverty. And I interviewed him on my channel a few days ago, but I think you should interview him, because on this particular topic, he is far more expert than me. He's just taken 4 years out of his life to dedicate his entire free time for 4 years just to this topic. And he's released a book, and it's available. It's called A World Without Poverty. Jason R.P. Smith is the writer, and he's a personal friend of mine. I've met him and his wife, and he's a really nice guy. But he spent a lot of time working on this to show that China is all around the world. He's listed every country where China has, and not every single infrastructure they've put in. He's just, in every single country in the world, he's listed some of the things that China has done, where they've done it. Yeah, it's a brilliant book. It's a book like Twitter. You can scroll through it. You don't have to sit and read the whole book, because there's a page on Angola, and there's a page on Algeria, and then you've got a page on Zimbabwe at the back. You could just go to your country if you want to have a look. And it's alphabetically organized, and he shows you what China is doing around the world. And sometimes it's interest-free loans, sometimes it's low-interest loans, sometimes it's standard loans, sometimes it's gifts, donations. But it's an incredibly moving moment when you realize that when people think China is looking for influence, they have literally spent their entire GDP looking for that influence. It's not really about that. It's about benefiting humanity. And Jason can tell you a lot more than I can about it on individual things. I asked him in the interview what was his favorite of all of the things. He said, my favorite's not even in the book.
What was his favorite?
Okay. What was it? They built, I can't remember what infrastructure it was. They built something. I think it might have been a hospital. And the payment for the hospital was in chocolate. The country was a massive chocolate. And they paid for the hospital, or whatever the infrastructure was, by supplying China with chocolate. What a great idea.
Interesting.
Yeah,
that's super interesting. And look, it makes friends. I mean, you go somewhere, you build a hospital as opposed to a military base.
So when America goes into that country and pays journalists, and they do this, they pay journalists in that country $100, which is a lot of money in Botswana and places like that, $100 cash for writing a negative China report. Half the journalists are going, I'll take your money, but I'm not writing a negative journalist report here. I'm writing a report that is kind of honest. So Africans don't see China the way Americans see China. Africans see China as being the country that's just invested and given them 500 jobs here, given them a new hospital, 10 new schools, a new train line, a new road, whatever it is that they've given. It's bridges, roads, it's everything, airports. They've done it all. They even put in, Africa now has a CDC, a Center for Disease Control. Africa has one. I'm not sure which country it is, but it was a gift from China for the whole of Africa, but it's based in one country.
Wow.
I think it might be Ethiopia. Might be.
One of the other things that you sent when we were emailing or corresponding back and forth was this rank hypocrisy that is taking place in the U.S., where the Trump administration has decided, well, we don't let, and this is the level of hypocrisy. I don't even know if you know how extreme this hypocrisy is on this. So when the Trump administration came in, they said the Biden administration was doing everything in their power to censor speech. We're not going to do that. We're going to have free speech. We're going to open up the dialogue, blah, 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 blah. J.D. Vance goes to Europe and browbeats them, saying your problems are your own. This is not from somewhere else. And you guys need to be more believing in liberal democracies in regards to free speech. And then Charlie Kirk dies, and Trump has decided to use this as a political weapon, as a cudgel, and has made this strident speech or tweet saying Antifa is a terrorist organization, and is using that as a cudgel to go after an organization that doesn't exist. B is a stalking horse for going after speech and content that Trump just doesn't like. So that can be on issues of Israel, or that could be on issues just going after Trump himself. In the Charlie Kirk case, Stephen Colbert was taken off. I don't know if Colbert wasn't taken off for Kirk. He was taken off for something else. But again,
he was taken off for insulting Trump. Yeah,
that's what it was. Jimmy Kimmel
is off now.
He's off TV now indefinitely. And in place of Jimmy Kimmel, what they're going to do is they're going to play. I want to show you something. This is, I think they call it Sinclair ABC network or stations. They own about 40% of the media in the United States.
Right.
And to show you how repetitive this is, meaning this is just propaganda being displayed to the American public, with the American public not realizing it just because of they don't get the clarity of seeing multiple broadcasts taking place at once. They are going to play a Charlie Kirk special at Jimmy Kimmel's time. The only thing Jimmy Kimmel said was they're trying to make this guy come across on the left, and this guy is most likely MAGA. For that, the network didn't see anything wrong with it, according to Rolling Stones. But because of the threat that Trump issued, they removed Jimmy Kimmel indefinitely.
The choice was, if they didn't remove Jimmy Kimmel, the government would remove their license to broadcast.
Exactly. And they said, we got to get rid of Kimmel, even though they didn't see anything wrong with what Kimmel said. And Kimmel didn't say anything wrong. They could disagree with him. He didn't say anything wrong. This is
Hi, I'm Fox and
watch this. This is what gets deployed to 40% of the channels in the United States.
Antonio's Jessica Headley.
And I'm Ryan Wolf.
Our greatest responsibility is to serve our Treasure Valley communities,
the El Paso, Las Cruces communities,
Eastern Iowa communities,
Mid-Michigan communities.
We are extremely proud of the quality, balanced journalism that CBS 4 News produces.
But
we are concerned about trouble and trend of irresponsible, one-sided news stories plaguing our country.
I'm not going to subject you to all of that. I'm making the point that every day on TV networks all across the United States, the same text, the same verbiage even, is being injected into the minds of Americans. And they think...
Same in Australia too.
Oh, it acts the same way?
Yeah, pretty much. You've basically got much, I think in terms of paper media, about 80% is owned by one man, and he's an American. He's an Australian-born, naturalized American, Rupert Murdoch. And he has control over quite a lot of people inside of other stations, other media. He owns Sky News. He has a fairly large ownership of all media, but in paper, newspapers, it's about 80%. It's extremely large. Yeah,
that is just propaganda.
Well, so let me put this into perspective, because there's a reason why I've kind of thought if we have time, we'll talk about this. I get challenged all the time by people saying you don't have freedom of speech in China, and I say yes, you do. You have the freedom to say whatever you want to say, as long as it's not violent, aggressive, insulting. It's not hateful. Now, this is the thing that they're saying in America. You can have hate speech. You can be a member of the Ku Klux Klan, and that is hateful. It's hateful behavior, hateful actions, and even hateful speech. You can't be a member of the Communist Party, not legally anyway, in America or in certain states. I think there's 1 or 2 states where you can, but most of America, the Communist Party is actually illegal still in America. But then now they're starting to say you can't insult people. You can't denigrate the memory of a great American, Charlie Kirk. You can't insult the president. And I get told all the time by people saying to me, I believe that you have free speech when you post something on Chinese social media that says Xi Jinping looks like Winnie the Pooh. Okay, I get that. First of all, you're a bloody idiot. Okay, I get the comparison, but this is the leader of 1.4 billion people and the 3rd largest nuclear-powered army and military, the largest military in the world. Why would I want to insult this guy who's managing an economy that is being hammered by the world's largest economy and the world's largest military every single day, and he's managed to get. And I'm living in China. I live a safe life. I live a convenient life. I have all of the things that I need. And I'm a retiree now. I have a pension coming from England, and I live the life of Riley in China on a British pension. This place is a really, really well-run place. Why do I want to insult the man who made this, the man who manages this? I'm not going to insult him. So all I would say is this: if I did, nothing would happen to me personally. What would happen is my post would be taken down. That's it. If I continue to do it, I might get a knock on the door from the police because they know who we are. We have real life. If we go onto our WeChat or our QQ or any of our social medias in China, they know who we are because you have to log in with your telephone number, and your telephone number is connected to your passport. Okay, that's a restriction, and I have no problem with it because I trust the government. I don't have a big deal about that. It's, well, what's the problem? So apart from that, if I posted this and I was persistent about it, I would probably get a knock on the door from the police saying, why are you doing this? Why are you, a foreigner, insulting our leader? And I'd say, well, I don't like him. Well, they'd say, if you don't like him, you can go home.
Yeah,
and that's a fair statement. And I kind of agree with America's statement on this. You have freedom of speech as an American, but if a Chinese person comes and says, I want to join the Communist Party, they say, no, you can't. You have to go. They kick you out. So you're subject to American laws and American restrictions, but also you need to respect those, and you don't bring your own standards in. So I don't bring my Western standards into China. I comply with China's laws most of the time. And so what would happen to me ultimately is they would say, if you're going to keep doing this, we're going to close your WeChat account. I don't want my WeChat account closed. It would be really inconvenient. So that's the worst punishment that I would get, is my WeChat account closed. Now I can't do it anymore. When I then apply for my next visa, they'd probably say, well, you've already told us you don't like China, so we're not going to renew your visa. I'm not getting kicked out. I'm just being told we're not going to renew your visa because you told us you don't like China. You don't like our leadership. That's what would happen to me. But I'm a foreigner here. My wife would have no such thing. If she did this, they would knock on her door and say, why are you doing this? You got to stop. And ultimately, they'd say, we're going to close your account down. So she can't do it anymore. And this is the disappeared. This person disappeared. Well, they didn't disappear at all. My wife's still there cooking the dinner and cleaning the house. And all she can't do is post things because her account has been closed because she broke the law. One of the laws says you can't insult anyone. Now, what that means is if someone in China compares me to a cartoon character, and somebody in your comments did a little while ago, that's okay. No, it wasn't a cartoon. I look and sound like the scientist on Jurassic Park, I think. I don't know if that's a bad thing. But I also look a bit like Prince Andrew in a certain light. So I'm not so happy about that anymore. But if someone insults me, I can go to the police and say, look what this person's done. They've insulted me. The police would take it down. They would go and say, well, you can't insult these people. You get a warning. Then you get called in to drink tea. This is an expression they use when the police call you in. And usually when you sit down, they give you a cup of tea. And they sit down and say, well, you can't do this. You got to stop doing that. And you go, oh, okay, I'll stop doing it. And if you don't, you can then be arrested on the word of a judge. They have to go to court, get an arrest warrant, and they can arrest you. And then you can be charged. Now, alternative to that, they can do something called administrative detention without involving the judge. they can just put me into a prison, a localized prison, not a real big prison with just a local jail, for 5, 10, or 15 days on the basis of the chief of police. Now, I have no recourse. I can't go to the court. I can't get out. I've broken the law, and I've refused to stop breaking the law. And they will then lock me up for 5 days or 10 days or 15 days and then let me out. Now, in my case as a foreigner, they'd probably let me out and say, sorry, mate, you're not getting a new visa. You're going home at the end of your visa term. Okay, fine. That's me done. So I wouldn't do it. And that is what would happen. Now, what happens in America is cancel culture of a much, much deeper and more insidious method. In China, you get warnings. In China, you get deleted posts before you get deleted accounts. Now, in America now, they're not just deleting accounts, they're deleting whole platforms. And I've had stuff on my TikTok, which they say this breaches our TikTok guidelines. Why? And they've given me the result of the appeal said, the appeal says, we still think you violated our guidelines. I've looked at every single one of my videos. None of them violate the guidelines. I just talk about China. So TikTok in America are already doing this now. So everything that they say about China is actually happening inside of America already. And the ban on VPNs, the ban on TikTok ban, which is pretty much anything that the president says, we don't like this. The law's in place right now. And if you go onto it, you as an American, even in Indonesia, where you are now, if you go onto TikTok after it's been banned, it's not going to get banned. But if you were to go onto TikTok after it got banned, you would be in breach of the law. If you used a VPN to do it, you and the VPN would be in breach of the law. So the VPN is going to control what you can go on. That's not a VPN. It's a control VPN. Now, if they're controlling what you can go on, then they're controlling your access to the internet. This is the worry that Australia currently has. They've just put into law a system that says you must be 18 to go on certain sites. Well, how do I prove I'm 18? Right. I have to register. And if I'm registered, they already know who I am. If I go into a VPN, they say you can't go on. So they already know. They're already doing it. Yep.
Jerry, we're gonna have to close.
Sure, sorry.
No, don't apologize. That's necessary for people to know, because you're right. People would be on this high horse and it's like, oh, you can't do X or Y, missing the fact that they're deporting people in the U.S. for stuff like that. I mean, they're sending people to other countries, for God's sake.
They're even sending Americans out.
Yeah. You should have seen the ICE raid that took place the other day on Americans.
In Van Nuys, I think it was Van Nuys. They threw a guy down on his arm, I think. Broke his arm or dislocated his elbow and then broke a couple of ribs. This guy's an American trying to protect his business from ICE. Yeah. He'll win a court case.
Jerry Gray, man, thank you for this. Jerry Gray, he's host of Jerry's Take on China. He's lived in China for more than 20 years, traveled more than 40,000 kilometers at this point across the country by bike. Jerry, and please put me in contact with Jason.
Jason, will do.
Yeah.
I'll send you an email.
Have a good one, man. Enjoy the rest of your night. Thank you for this.
Thank you very much. And thanks to your audience. Good night.
Have a good one.